This video is going to discuss the rhetorical situation and the constituent parts that we think of when we are talking about the rhetorical situation. Some of you have heard about this in other upper division courses that you have taken. Maybe some of you have even heard about the rhetorical situation in 1102. So this may be a review for some of you. It may be the first time for others, but this is the context that we're going to use to analyze and talk about a lot of publications throughout the entire course. A rhetorical situation arises when a rhetor, which can either be a speaker or a writer, sees a need to communicate with an audience in order to accomplish a goal. The rhetorical situation is a set of related factors whose interaction creates and influences a particular discourse, which may take the form of speech or it could take the form of writing. Obviously, in this course, it's going to take the form of writing. So the rhetorical situation is the environment in which the discourse will exist and operate. Okay. If some of you are unfamiliar with the word discourse, what I'm referring to is a group of people who have common values and goals that use written communication to be able to operate and communicate. So the rhetorical situation does include these particular parts: the exigents, the rhetors, the audience, and the constraints. And so the rest of the video, I'm actually going to break these down and talk to you more in detail about them. When we're talking about exigents, we are referring to the matter and the motivation of the particular discourse. Okay? Exigence is the driving force in a rhetorical situation that makes a rhetor or a writer take the trouble to communicate. It often appears as a problem that needs to be solved or some condition that needs to be changed. So exigence answers questions like, so what? Why should we care about this subject? What's the big deal? Exigence concerns matter in two senses: the subject matter and why that subject matter matters to people involved in the particular situation. So these are some questions that you may want to ask yourself when you're thinking about the exigence of a situation. In other words, why is the writer responding and feeling a need to write to the editor of a particular publication? Why do we need another article on gun control? You know, what is the driving force that is motivating the need to write? So think about these particular questions when you think of exigence. What subject does the discourse address? What deeper issues are represented by the subject matter? What does it value here? What problems, questions, or conflicts need to be resolved? Is this the right time for this argument? What given events, occasions, assignments has prompted it? And why do the problems or questions or conflicts surrounding a given discourse, if I address this, why will it matter? Okay. You also want to think about, what are my aims? What are my goals? What is the desired outcome? Does it have primary and secondary objectives? And how might the audience react to this particular discourse? Once you determine that there's a need to write, there's an occasion to write, there's a situation to write, an audience that needs to be addressed, then you want to look at specifically who you are addressing this particular argument or writing to. And that refers to our audience. If you learn nothing else from this course but how to identify a target audience and to think about a target audience in your writing for nonfiction, then I will have accomplished exactly what I hope to for this particular semester, or I should say summer. A lot of times as writers, we sit down and we put our thoughts down and we revise them, and then we just hope that there'll be an audience out there that'll be interested. Nonfiction writing is very different. You are looking at a publication, thinking about who is reading that publication, what might interest them, and then you determine what it is that you may be writing. So there are things that you should think about when you're thinking about the audience. What might be their purpose for reading something that you would write? What role does the audience play? And I liken this to imagining, what do they do for a living? What kind of education do they have? Are they married? What is their gender? What kind of hobbies? What kind of interest do they have? When we think about the audience, we also think about, what do they care about? It's great that a particular issue may be of value to you as the writer, but what's more important in nonfiction is for you to determine why the audience might care about a given subject matter. You also want to consider, what do they value? Again, if they don't have the same set of values, then what is it that you're hoping to accomplish as a writer? Okay, people are engaged in reading usually because they have a shared set of values, and especially this is true in argument. People are called to action because they value similar purposes. We also want to ask ourselves, what do they believe? Along with looking at the audience and the particular components that I just mentioned, you also need to take into consideration, when you're looking at a rhetorical situation, the constraints. So the constraints involve the rhetor and the audience. So, and a lot of times these are looked at as just negative things, but actually they can be positive assets that can work in the rhetor's favor as well. So essentially you're asking yourself, what are my assets and liabilities in this situation? For example, if you were going to write about abortion, you would want to consider what the audience values, what they care about, what they believe, what kind of roles are your audience playing, so that the examples and the language that you use would not necessarily be seen as a liability if you were trying to convince them, of your particular position. So does the situation restrict the form of the discourse? Are there limitations on length, structure, appearance, style, etc.? And so a lot of the constraints that we'll be talking about are not just subject matter or particular issues that you may want to write about, but you're also going to be looking at things like text length, structure, appearance, and style, and whether that's appropriate for a certain publication. A lot of times you can write something that's a well-written, valuable, meaningful article, and yet it doesn't get published because it's 2,500 words, and everything in a particular publication that you're looking to publish in, only publishes things 500 words or less. So constraints can also pertain to the structure as well as the content of the matter. So I mentioned earlier that the rhetor is the writer or the speaker, and so this is the person responsible for having an authoritative voice. This is the person that is choosing to speak or to write in a given context, in a given situation. This is the initiator. This is the person who's delivering. This is the person who's taking responsibility for introducing a subject to a particular discourse. So when we look at this McDonald's logo, think of who the rhetor is, which is pretty obvious. It's McDonald's. Okay, who might be the audience? And so when you say things like, well, everybody that eats at McDonald's, I don't think so. Think about specifically who McDonald's is marketing to. Is this an older audience, a younger audience? What do they do for a living? Narrow it down. Think very specifically about the roles that the audience might play. And then you also want to think about the constraints. What constraints does McDonald's have in advertising in this particular way? Okay, so and this is just one short example, but now as you are traveling about Orlando and looking through, hardcover magazines that you may have laying around, look at advertisements. They're all about a rhetorical situation and how they are appealing to you as a given audience. and understanding them and trying to identify these particular components will help you when you write your first comparative analysis. And will also help you this week when we're talking in the discussion boards about particular online publications and why either certain layouts or certain text are more appealing to the reader audience than others. You got to hold